So, welcome again to everybody, and hope you had a good time these couple of days. I know the extended lockdown will be trying everybody's patience, including mine. But at least we have these online lectures to keep us entertained and educated at the same time. And to that end, I hope everybody followed the previous lectures discussion properly and most things in it. So, what I will start with today is a very quick recap of the things that we learned in the last lecture. Then we will move on to the worksheet problems and all that. So, as a recap of session 1, so let's just quickly go over the important aspects that we learned. Okay. So, the first thing we saw was the definition of vectors. Okay, that I'm sure everybody has understood what they are. But more importantly, how to, given a physical quantity, even if it is a little bit confusing. At the beginning, when we look at the quantity, we are not sure whether to define it as a vector or scalar. How to come up with a very simple way of understanding or classifying it as vector or scalar. And the answer to that is we just think that given the physical quantity, we take two values of it and we want to add it. So will we add it like we add normal numbers arithmetically? Or will the direction become important when we are adding? So the moment you answer that question for yourself, the thing becomes very simple, that whether it is a scalar or a vector. So for example, you're adding two electric currents, or you're adding two volumes, or you're adding two intervals of time, 15 minutes plus 12 minutes, something like that. You will just always add them like algebraic numbers by the rules of scalar addition, what we call. Whereas the moment you have two forces acting, or you have two displacements, or you have two momenta, or things like that, what will happen is we saw that the addition requires a different set of principles which are called the laws of vector addition. So given any physical quantity, हमें क्या सोचना है कि इसको ऐड करने के लिए क्या प्रिंसिपल्स यूज करने हैं. अगर स्केलर प्रिंसिपल यूज कर सकते हैं तो वो स्केलर क्वांटिटी हो जाते हैं. whereas if we see that उसको ऐड करने के लिए we need the direction and we need to apply the vector principles जो हम last lecture में सीखे हैं, then we can see that it automatically becomes a vector quantity. So that was about ascertaining what is vector and what is scalar. Still have some people coming in, but anyway, we are doing the recap of the last section, so it should be easy to follow. Now the next thing we learned was about notation. Vector notation. What are the symbols that we use for the different quantities related to vector? So we saw that any vector quantity is notated by alphabetical symbol with an arrow on top of it. So the arrow shows that we are dealing with a vector quantity. Whereas if we are interested only in the magnitude of the vector, then we put the vector symbol in between a modulus sign. So this sign is, the proper definition of it is that it is modulus of vector E. And this symbol is properly defined as it is the magnitude, or what we call the modulus. Magnitude and modulus are interchangeable, okay, of vector E. Whereas this symbol itself is read as the vector quantity E. Okay. And we saw that in short form, we can also write the magnitude of a vector as just the symbol itself. So, in everyday short form language, if I say quantity small a, it means the magnitude of acceleration. But if I say E with a vector sign, it means the vector of acceleration itself. So it should have both direction and magnitude. So something like that. Okay. Then we also saw a couple of special types of vectors, which were namely the unit vector, which is given by the cap symbol, and the null vector, which is given by 0 with the vector sign. So this was also something important. Okay. Then the next thing, where the real important part of the lecture started last time, was about the representation of vectors. So we saw about one type of representation last time, which was namely the geometrical representation of vectors. So in geometrical representation, we saw that we actually represent the vector by an arrow with a geometrical quantity, something that we can draw on a piece of paper, on a two-dimensional view. So that's something that we can draw is an arrow, and that arrow is used to represent the vector E in such a way that the length of the arrow becomes directly proportional to the magnitude of vector E. Okay. Or we can say that the length is directly proportional to what we call in sign language or notation as mod A. Okay. So this is this, whereas the direction of the arrow's head, the direction in which the arrow's head is pointing, which in this case you can see is like this, that becomes what we call the direction of the vector E, or better stated, we can say it is the line of action. It is the line of action for the vector E. So for example, if A is representing a force, that means the line of action along which the force is acting is that particular line where the arrowhead is pointing. If it's representing a displacement, then the actual direction of the displacement or the line of action of the displacement is nothing but that particular arrow. So that's how we saw that the same quantity, the same geometrical quantity, which is the arrow, it represents two things for us. It represents the magnitude of the vector and it also represents the line of action or the direction. And to that end, we saw that as long as we are dealing with a combination of vectors which are lying in a two-dimensional plane, that means they are all pointing in directions which lie in a two-dimensional and not a three-dimensional, but they lie in a plane. Then we can represent them by these kind of arrows because we can draw arrows in a two-dimensional plane. As of now, we don't get into drawing arrows in 3 dimensions, in holographic diagrams and all that. So we just restrict ourselves to two-dimensional vectors when we're talking about geometrical representation. Okay, so that was the second thing that we saw after notation. Then we started looking at the other things like operations of vectors, operations involving vectors, and to that end we saw the multiplication of vector by a scalar, and we also saw the vector addition. Okay, so at this stage we are going to start quickly reviewing the question set that we have. So I'll just give you guys a minute to go through the question set that I had given you the worksheet, and I will just get back to you in a moment. Okay, so just open the worksheet and go through question number 1 and question number 3, and I will be back with you in a moment. Okay, people, so hope this is clear to you so far. Right, so this was the step where we are adding the vectors A and B, and in that triangle we are finding x, y. Okay, now next stage is we using the values of x and y. Now we solve the larger triangle where we are finding the magnitude of this hypotenuse, which is r. So for the larger triangle, you can see the base becomes a plus x, the perpendicular becomes y, and just by using Pythagoras theorem, the hypotenuse is square of the base plus square of the perpendicular, square root of the whole thing. So doing that algebra, we come to our final step where our magnitude of the resultant becomes this particular quantity. Okay. So from this point onwards, this formula becomes important for us. I'll just keep this here for a moment and then take it down so you can understand the steps. All right, people. So hope the steps are clear up to here. Okay. Now moving on to the last part, it's just a matter of applying the identity that cos square theta plus sine square theta is 1. So using that identity, we get the final result. So this is about the magnitude of the resultant. Now remember, we have to also find the angle alpha. Okay, so how do we find the angle alpha? So let's go back to the diagram for a moment. And now again think in terms of the larger triangle, the larger right angle triangle. So alpha is the unknown, but now the perpendicular and the base are known. So the perpendicular is y and the base is a plus x. So tan alpha becomes y upon a plus x. So that is the thing that we use to find out. Okay, so we can see that tan alpha over here becomes y upon x. So next step, we can write this as another formula that tan alpha, sorry, a plus x, the base is a plus x. So tan alpha is equal to y, which is b sine theta, upon a plus x, which is a plus b cos theta. So this is like the second part of the triangle law statement. Okay. This is also the second part of the triangle law statement because it gives us the second piece of information. Okay. So this is also triangle law. Second part. Okay, so this is about the both the magnitude and the direction of the resultant vector. This is how we get it. Okay, So I will quickly, so this is the point where we had ended up last time. Okay, so I'll quickly take you through some of the questions that were there in the worksheet and see how you were going to apply these concepts in those questions. Okay, so we'll do a quick review of our worksheet problems. All right, so pick out your worksheet and go through question number 1. I'll explain it in just a moment. So question 1 was like this, that you had two vectors whose magnitudes were given as 3 and 4. Okay. And you had to find the condition such that their resultant let's say R, which is basically equal to A plus B, that is what we mean by resultant, has magnitude. In one case, we wanted to solve for the resultant being 5. In another case, we wanted to solve for the resultant being 7. And in another case, we wanted to solve for the resultant being 1. Okay. So let's just take a quick look at the question and first understand what the question is trying to say. तो देखो क्वेश्चन में क्या इंफॉर्मेशन दिया हुआ है मुझे दिया हुआ है कि मैग्नीट्यूड ऑफ ए कितना है, मुझे दिया हुआ है मैग्नीट्यूड ऑफ बी कितना है, और मैग्नीट्यूड ऑफ रिजल्टेंट भी दिया हुआ है. सो इट्स लाइक अ रिवर्स क्वेश्चन. I am given the resultant, but what I have to find out the condition on A and B, which means what they are asking is the angle, because the magnitude of the vectors is given. So what I mean by condition is that what is the other information which is not given to me in the question yet, and that is nothing but the angle between the two vectors. So you have to find the angle between the two vectors so that the resultant becomes 5, or you have to find the angle between the two vectors so that the resultant becomes 7, or the resultant becomes 1. So what we'll see next is you have both a geometrical way of solving this as well as an algebraic way of solving it. For example, if you think just geometrically कि ऐसा कौन से triangle है जिसमें two sides are 3 and 4 and the third side is 5, you'll realize that they are a Pythagorean triplet, right? 3, 4 and 5 are a Pythagorean triplet. So that means if the angle between A and B is 90 degrees, then the resultant of A and B should be 5. So the answer to the first part just comes by that simple information that 3, 4, 5 are the sides of a right angle triangle. So you don't even need to apply the formula which we've written above, which is the statement of the triangle law. Similarly, if you think 7, what kind of relationship it has with 3 and 4, you understand that 7 is the sum of 3 and 4. So you go back to that triangle and try to think, or think in terms of displacement. Yeah, I'm making two displacements, one of 3 and then one of 4. But how should I keep the angle between them so that my resultant displacement is 7? So you'll realize that you should continue in the same direction. That means the angle theta should be 0. And like that, you'll come to the conclusion for the third part also. And you can work it out that way. Now, what I will also show you today here is how you can solve this thing by using what we call the formula method, which is the statement of the the statement of the triangle law. That formula, that R is equal to root of A square plus B square plus 2AB cos theta. How we can use that also over here to find the angle. Okay. So first of all, I'll just give all of you a bit of time to just work it out the way I told you using the geometry. Just work this out. So coming back to this, guys, so what we can see here is that in the first case, if I go for a geometrical solution, that the resultant is equal to 5 in magnitude, whereas A and B were 3 and 4, you realize the only way that is possible is that if A and B are like this. They are perpendicular to each other. So this vector A has a magnitude of 3, this vector B has a magnitude of 4, but more importantly, the angle between them is 90 degrees. Theta is equal to 90 degrees. That will give you the condition for the resultant here to become 5. Okay. So the condition for this, what we have to solve in the question, is that theta is equal to 90 degrees. Okay. This was the solution to that. Now, similarly, if I come to the second part, I wanted the resultant to have a magnitude of 7. Okay. So you'll see that the condition for the resultant to be 7 now will have to be like this, that if the vector A is like this of 3, the vector B will have to be in the same direction, but of 4. Only then my resultant will become, this is A and B. So this is a line of length 4 and this is a line of length 3. Here the angle between them is 0, or A is what we can say parallel to B. There A was perpendicular to B. This is the condition now required for this thing, the resultant to become equal to. So now you can see your resultant displacement is going to be this. This is the condition for the resultant to become 7. So this becomes my condition. This is the condition for the resultant's magnitude to be 7. Like that. Okay. Now, like that, if you visualize the third problem now, the third part of this, you'll realize the only way your resultant can become 1 in magnitude is if this happens. Let's say your vector E was like this. Now you want your resultant displacement to be 1, but after making a second displacement of 4, that means this must have gone like this. Your second displacement you must have made after making a U-turn. That's the only way your resultant displacement will be of 1. So this is just a matter of observation. I'm understanding that 1 is the difference of 4 and 3. So that's why. So coming back to this diagram now, my resultant displacement is now becoming which one? It is becoming this one. This is my resultant displacement. So you can see the resultant displacement is of magnitude unity. So we started from here. Okay. So the relationship between these two is that the angle is now 180 degrees. You can see. So the condition here becomes that A is opposite to B, or theta is equal to 180 degrees. This way becomes a way of solving the question. Now we look at another way of solving the same thing. Okay. So I'll just leave you with a moment first for these things. So these were the vector diagrams, you can see, or the geometrical method of solving the first and second part. people. So hope you are able to understand this. Alright people, so hope you are all able to follow this. Okay, now continuing this ahead, you can see that, yeah, we can also solve this problem by using the triangle law method. Okay, so solving the same problem by formula method, how we'll solve this? That is like is that we have the formula that the resultant's magnitude is root of a square plus b square plus 2ab cos theta. This is the statement of triangle law that we just saw earlier today. How we can make use of this to find theta when r, a and b are given. So for example, in the first part, r is given to us as 5, magnitude of the vector e is given to us as 3, and magnitude of the vector b is given to us as 4. And what we have to do is find the angle between the two vectors. So all we do is substitute this information here. So see, if we do a direct substitution, we have resultant is equal to 5 on the left hand side. That should be square root of a square, so that is 3 square, plus b square, that is 4 square, plus 2 times e, that is 3, into b, that is 4, into cos theta. So now you look at this equation. This equation has only one unknown quantity. What is cos theta? So we can first find out what is cos theta from this, and then we can find out the value of theta itself. Okay. So what we do is we square both the sides. So squaring both the sides, we get 5 square is equal to 3 square plus 4 square plus 24 cos theta. I just check my calculation once this is correct. So 3 into 2 into 4 will give you 24. Alright. So next, 25 is equal to 25 plus 24 cos theta. So what information further we are getting from this? The information we are getting further from this is that cos theta must be 0, which you know implies to the fact that theta is equal to 90 degrees, or the vector E is perpendicular to the vector B. So I'll just minimize this and show you all the steps involved. So this is another way in which we can solve the same problem. We can make use of the formula that we have for the resultant and just apply the condition of the question. The condition of the question क्या दिया हुआ था? Magnitude of the resultant दिया हुआ था and A and B के magnitudes दिए थे, and we had to find out theta. So we can also, instead of making a triangle and trying to understand what is the angle from that triangle, we can also just solve this by using the triangle law formula, or what is called the formula based approach. So this is an alternate approach of solving the same problem. Okay. So like you people to just note this down and then try out the second part of this question on your own by this method. In the second part, everything else is the same, but you just replace the magnitude of resultant with what? You replace it with 7. Instead of the 5 over here, you replace it with 7 over here and see what kind of solution you get. So you will see, you will get an interesting solution over there, which will give you the same result that we had got earlier, that they should be parallel vectors. That means theta should be 0. Okay, so hope you have understood this part, all of you. Now I'm just applying the same method to the second part. In the second part, I want the resultant to be 7 while the magnitudes of A and B were 3 and 4. And I want to find out theta. So I use the formula. The resultant is square root of A square plus B square plus 2ab cos theta. So 7 is equal to root of 3 square plus 4 square. Okay. So let's just square both the sides now. So 7 square is equal to 3 square plus 4 square plus 24 cos theta. And now let us just solve this for theta or cos theta first. So 49 is equal to 25 plus 24 cos theta. So interestingly, this will give you cos theta as 49 minus 25 divided by 24, which is 24 divided by 24, which is cos theta equal to 1, which, as you all know, happens when theta is equal to 0. So that is the condition for A to be parallel to B. Okay, the vectors A and B have to be parallel. So this is the formula based approach of solving the same question. So just take a moment to go through that, and then we'll come to more things. Now I'm going to leave the third part for you to solve by a similar method, and that you will be able to do especially after today's lecture, because in today's lecture we will be understanding in detail how to find cos theta for obtuse angles. Okay. So don't worry for the fact that you will get cos theta as a negative quantity or something. That will become very clear to you in some time. Now let me come to some of the other questions. So next I'm going to look at question number 3. Okay, because 2 is similar to this, and 2 you'll be able to work out yourself. So go through question number 3. I'll work that out in detail. So question number 3 is actually very similar to the first part of this. If you have the question in front of you, I'll just read it out. So question 3 says, we have 3 vectors A, B and C of magnitude 12, 5 and 13. 12, 5 and 1, 3, 13 respectively. And given that A plus B is equal to C, then we have to find the angle between A and B. Okay. So given that A plus B is equal to C, we have to find the angle between A and B. And again, understanding that I have some more people in the waiting room for whatever reason. So I think people are having difficulty with connectivity today. Anyway, don't worry about all that. We will have the video lecture also, as I told you. So now let's come to the next question, which is the third question. So I'll just put up the language of the question on the board for you first. So you'll realize it's very similar to the first question we did, first part. Okay. The third question says that you have given this condition that the magnitude of vector E is 12. The magnitude of vector B is 5. And the magnitude of vector C is 13. And that E plus B is equal to the vector C. Yes, Dhrumi, that is correct. Your answer is correct. What you have said over here is correct. So you have to find the angle between E and B. Good. So I'm getting some answers on the chat right now, and so far the 2 answers I've got are correct. Very good. Okay. So just apply the same principle. Now you'll realize here that these 3 are a Pythagorean triplet. 13 square happens to be 12 square plus 5 square, because 13 square is 169, and that happens to be 12 square, which is 144 plus 25. Okay, so that means they are a Pythagorean triplet. So that means the angle has to be 90 degrees. So coming back here, if this is the vector E and this is the vector B, and they are of magnitude 12 and 5 respectively, and the angle between them is 90 degrees, then we know for a fact that C, which is the sum of A and B, will have to be 13. So the vector C, which is in fact the vector sum or the resultant of A and B, is 13. So we know here that the angle between A and B, this one, has to be equal to 90 degrees. Okay. Else we can always use the formula that since A plus B is equal to C, we can also use the formula alternatively. We can use the formula that magnitude of C is equal to magnitude of A plus B. So that is the root of A square plus B square plus 2AB cos theta. This is C. Now you put the values of A, B and C here. So A is 12, B is 5 and C is 13. And you will see, you will come to the conclusion that cos theta is 0, which means theta is 90 degrees. So now you're getting an idea of how we make use of both the principles, either the geometrical method or we make use of the formula based method, this method or this method, to solve this kind of cases. Okay. So hope this question's solution is fully clear to all of you. Now if we move on to question number 4, which is slightly better level of question compared to these two. Why I'm saying better level of question is because the language of the question is little tricky and we have to understand the language properly first. Okay. So one of the aspects of JEE type of questions or JEE pattern questions is that sometimes what the question is saying, जो question paper set है जो कहने की कोशिश कर रहा है, it is given, it's presented more in the form of a riddle or in the form of a little bit of a puzzle. So first we have to understand the language itself properly, what the question is trying to say. Then we are able to understand exactly how to solve it. So let us try and understand what question number 4 is saying. Then we'll come to that. Okay. So you will have the full whiteboard notes of this, so don't worry. The question which I'm giving you a hint or solving on the board here, you will have these solutions with you. So the fourth one is saying that there are two forces F1 and F2 which are of same magnitude. So F1, let's say, and F2 are forces of same magnitude. And the resultant of F1 and F2 is such that, so if R is the resultant of F1 and F2, it is such that the magnitude of R square is equal to 3 times the product of F1's magnitude and F2's magnitude. So this is the meaning of the second part of the statement, okay? That the resultant square is 3 times the product of the two forces. So it means that the resultant's magnitude, if you square it, it is 3 times the product of F1 and F2. So from this, we have to find theta, that is the angle between F1 and F2. So what I want you people to do first of all is go through the question's language once more, okay, and make sure that you understand why I have interpreted the language in this way, how I've converted the statement that is given over there into these mathematical equations. Just make sure you understand that part first, and then the second part will be easy, where we are actually solving the condition for theta. Okay, people, so hope the statements are clear. Okay. Now let me see how I will actually solve this. Okay, so let me start by saying that, okay, suppose the magnitude of F1 is some x in newtons or whatever, because it's a force. Then it implies the magnitude of F2 is also x. Okay, and because it's given that their magnitudes are same, and given that r square is equal to 3f1 f2, it means that r square is equal to 3 times x square. Okay, and since r and x are both magnitude quantities because they are the magnitude of forces, so we can say when we take square root, r is equal to root 3 times x. So there's a small technicality here in this statement that in general, if r square is 3x square, we should say r is plus minus of root 3x. But here r cannot be a negative quantity because r is after all the magnitude of the resultant. So it is by definition a quantity which does not have algebraic sign. So we will write it only as root 3x. Okay. So first just absorb this, okay, what I'm saying. So the above language of the question now I've converted to this, that since the magnitude of the two forces is same. Okay, so if I say the magnitude of force F1 is x, then the magnitude of force F2 also has to be equal to x. Okay, so the moment I say that suppose the magnitude of F1 is equal to x, then immediately it implies that the magnitude of F2 also has to be x. Now the other thing given to me in the question was that r square, this was given in the question, that r square is equal to 3f1 f2. So now f1's magnitude is equal to f2, which is x. So r square is 3 equal to 3x square, which means that r itself is root 3x square. And now you would have understood how we'll solve for the angle theta, because we'll now use the simple statement of the triangle law. Okay. So next step what we will do is we will use the statement that since r is equal to the vector sum of f1 and f2. So what can we say about their magnitudes? It is the triangle law relationship, that magnitude of r should be square root of magnitude of f1 square plus f2 square plus 2f1 f2 cos theta. Okay. So this is the same as a triangle law statement. Instead of a and b, we have f1 and f2 here. Now see what we had found out, that r had to be replaced with root 3x, and f1 and f2 individually were how much? X. So this becomes x square plus x square plus 2x square cos theta. So now what I want you to do is, just like we've done in the previous question, square both sides of the equation and find the value of cos theta. Okay, just work out, even though x is an unknown, you will see it will cancel out on both sides. So just find the value of cos theta and that will give you the answer. Okay. So just take a moment to understand this step and then work out the rest yourself. Okay. I'm waiting for your answers on chat. Okay, so I'm just substituting the information that was given to me in the question in the first place, that f1's magnitude was x, f2's magnitude was x. So accordingly, this is what is happening to the resultant. It's root 3x. So making use of that, yes, very good, Dhruvi. You got the answer correct. Good. Okay, so while everybody else is also solving this, I will just take the steps forward. So next step, what I'll see, we'll get over here is this. Squaring both the sides, we will get 3x square is equal to, on this side, x square plus x square plus 2x square cos theta. Correct, Isha, that is correct. Isha Naik, you have also got the correct answer. So 3 is equal to 2 plus 2 cos theta. So that tells me that cos theta is how much? Half. Okay. So next, that tells me that cos theta is t minus 2 divided by 2, or cos theta is half. So that tells me that theta is equal to 60 degrees, which is the correct answer that you people have got. Right, so that's the solution of question number 4. So question 1, 3 and 4 I have solved for you fully. Question 2 at the moment I'm leaving out for you to work out. And yes, and that's correct. Okay, Likit, good, you got it. Okay. Now some of the questions further ahead, I'm going to give you some hints because they're very interesting questions. I really want you to solve them if you haven't got the answer yet. Okay. So the 5th question is that carom board problem. It's very interesting. So let me make a diagram of the carom board first. So of course, this is with the assumption that all of you have played carom, which I'm sure you have. So I have some idea about it. Okay. So the carom board size is given to me in the question as 4 feet by 4 feet. Okay. So this is 4 feet by 4 feet. Now just to help me understand the problem a little better, let me also make the lines which are supposedly bisecting this. Okay. So these are, let's say, the bisecting lines. Now what the question is saying is that, as you know, in the game of carom, there are pockets in all the corners. And the whole purpose is to, create collisions with the sliding coins and all that. So let's say the pockets that we've got in the corners, this corner is E, this corner is B, this corner is, let's say, C, and this corner is D. Now your queen coin is initially sitting at the center. So since the center is a centroid, let's label the center as O. And then you're hitting a shot in such a way that you're making it rebound from the front surface. So you're making this rebound from the front surface somewhere here. And after the rebound, it gets collected in the one of the back pockets. Okay, so it could have been this way also, but here I'm just assuming. So this is what the question is telling you, that the queen coin is made to rebound from the front wall and then get pocketed at one of the corners at the back. So let's say the point at which we make it rebound, that we are labeling as the point P over here. Okay. So we want to find these displacements. We want to find the displacement from O to P. Now, we want to find the displacement from P to C. And we also want to find the final net displacement, which is this line over here. So I'm not drawing so that I don't confuse the diagram, but the line from O to C, this particular line, this one. So I also want to find this particular displacement, the final displacement. And in fact, that's very easy because you can see that is just the half the diagonal of the square. So that's not too difficult. The more tricky part is this and this. So basically, if you create carom enough, you'll realize that you need to aim at a particular point here so that you get this at the correct direction. If you aim too much to this side, you will end up having a shot like this. If you aim it somewhere here, you'll be unsuccessful because this will hit here and get rebounded like this. It will never come here. Or if you aim too much towards the right or towards the left, it will come somewhere over here. If you want it to get pocketed here, there's a particular point at which you have to aim, and that point will dictate how much this displacement OP is and how much this displacement PC is. Okay. Now, how do we solve this? So for that, I'll be using a trick. And the little trick or the little assumption here, I'm going to state further by this, that when the collision happens at the point P, you have to treat the path, incoming and outgoing kind of path. The path of the particle, or in this case, the coin, before it hits and after it hits, you have to treat it like a mirror image reflection. Okay, so we will indirectly use the principle of reflection over here. So just a moment, let me redraw that thing. Yeah, so when I come to this reflection part over here, I will use a small assumption that if this is the normal that you're drawing at the point of intersection, then this angle should be equal to this angle. Or that also means that if this angle here is theta, then this angle here is also theta. Okay. So this is like a principle of reflection that we are using. So the collision or the rebound at the point P will be like a mirror reflection. That is the little trick that we are using. Just imagine this part here is like a mirror, and this is a beam of incident light and a beam of reflected light. So that's why these two angles will be equal. Next, if I just label this corner point as, let's say, some E or something. So next step, what we'll do to solve is that triangle OE, the two right angle triangles you can see in the diagram, the small right angle triangle, the triangle OEP, okay, and the other larger triangle, this one. So that is triangle CBP. Okay, they are similar right angle triangles. Okay, they are similar triangles which are right angled. So you can use the geometry of similar triangles. That is, the ratio of the sides is same. Okay, so they are similar right angled triangles. So this is a hint. This is the second hint for the question, whereas the first hint was this one. That it's okay. So using these two hints, you try to work out this question. Okay. Just minimizing this a little bit for your benefit. So use these two hints to try and solve this question, which is question number 5. Okay. I will give you the solution and the answer key later, but I would like you people, because it's a very interesting type of problem, I'd like you to solve it by using this hint. Okay, so hope this is clear so far. Okay. Now moving on to the rest of the questions. Now question number 6 is again something I'm leaving for you to attempt, because it's a comparatively easier question. The advice I will give you for question 6 is just make a proper diagram and relate all the displacements with respect to the geographical directions given in the diagram. So it says that first it moves towards north, then it moves towards east and things like that. So just make a diagram in which you have defined your north, south, east, west according to your XY coordinate system, and just try and trace the path of the car. Okay. And from that you will be able to figure out what the displacement is. It's pretty easy. Now, 7th question, again, I will help you solve a little bit, because we will see an interesting property of a triangle in 7th question. In fact, it's very similar to a question we had solved in the last lecture. So in 7th question, what they're giving you is, first of all, they're giving you a diagram. Okay. So in 7th question, first they're given you a diagram where with respect to the XY axis, I have some kind of displacements given to me. Okay. So if this is my x-axis and this is my y-axis, is given to me that there are two displacements A and B, which are each of 10 meters, but their directions are as per shown over here. So A is a displacement like this, let's say. Okay. A is such that its magnitude is 10 meters, but it's making an angle of 30 degrees with respect to the x-axis. Now simultaneously a second displacement B is given to you, something like this. Now B's displacement magnitude is such that, I mean B displacement is such that its magnitude is also 10 meters. Okay, this is also 10 meters, but this angle that it is making with respect to A, this angle is given to us as 120 degrees. Okay, now it is given in the question that suppose C is the sum of A and B, then we have to find the magnitude and direction of C. So if the vector C is equal to the sum of A and B, okay, then find the magnitude of C and the angle made by C with respect to not A, but with respect to x-axis. So this is what we have to do in the question. So I'll just leave you with the diagram for a moment first. Okay. Then I'll give you a hint on what you have to do here. So the hint is, see, first you draw the vector C in the diagram. So you'll see you'll get a triangle. And you notice in the triangle, two sides are equal, 10 meters and 10 meters. So first of all, it's an isosceles triangle. Then solve the triangle a little bit further and you'll realize it's a much easier triangle to solve and you'll get the answer quite easily. Okay, so hope this is clear what I'm saying till date about it. Okay, so first draw the vector C in this diagram given that C is equal to A plus B, and then try to solve that ABC triangle using the fact that the two of the sides are equal, they're 10 meters each, and also that angle is 120 degrees given to you. So see, when you use these two facts that the two sides are equal A and B and the angle exterior between them is 120, you'll see it's a very easy triangle to solve. So if anybody is getting the answer by using this, you can please send it to me on chat. Has anybody got the answer so far? Yeah, I see some messages, so I'm just. Yeah, one person has got the right answer about the magnitude of C. Good. Okay, so let's look at this. So what's happening here is in this diagram, the vector C. So I'm helping you, don't worry. Okay, so the vector C in the diagram is which one? Is this one? This is the resultant of A and B. Okay, this is C is equal to A plus B, this one. Okay, so I want to find out the magnitude of this. Okay, so let me zoom into this triangle first. Okay, so look at the properties of this triangle. So something very interesting here is in this triangle, this side is equal to this side, correct? So if this side is equal to this side, it means that this angle will be equal to this angle. That is a property of isosceles triangle, that when two sides are equal, then their opposite angles are also equal. And then another property of the triangle is that the sum of these two angles is equal to what? The exterior angle. So you realize that what are these angles equal to? They are each equal to 60 degrees, which means that the third angle will also become 60, which means that it will become an equilateral triangle. So what is happening here is the sum of interior opposite angles is equal to the exterior angle. So 2 alpha is equal to 120 degrees. So that means alpha is equal to 60 degrees. Now you can clearly see that therefore, if this angle is beta, beta is also becoming 60 degrees. So therefore, it's not only an isosceles triangle. Now it's which type of triangle? Equilateral triangle. So what is the magnitude of C? That's also becoming 10 meters. So that's how this question becomes ultimately very easy. Okay. Just you have to use that small fact. Okay. So that means it is an equilateral triangle. So the moment it is an equilateral triangle, C is equal to A equal to B, which is 10 meters. So that solves one part, that we have got the magnitude of the vector C. Now the other part, we have to find the angle that the vector C is making with the x-axis. So that I'm coming to, that is very easy. In the diagram, you can see this angle that the vector C is making with the x-axis is actually alpha plus 30. And we just found out that alpha is equal to 60 degrees. So the angle is how much? Is 90 degrees. So the answer to the second part of this question 7 becomes that it is 90 degrees. Okay, people. So hope this this question is entirely clear now. Okay, so further you can see that this total angle will become 90 degrees because alpha is coming out to be 60 degrees. Okay, so that becomes your answer. So we wanted to find out the angle that C makes with respect to the x-axis. So C is at 90 degrees with respect to x-axis, or is along the y-axis in simple terms. All right, so that becomes the complete solution of this question. Okay, now moving on, eighth question, I will again give you a little bit of hint how to solve. So eighth question is about the displacement of the tip of a minute hand of a clock. Okay? So if you just visualize the clock's dial as this round. Okay. So in terms of minutes, this is 0/60. This is 15. This is 30. This is 45. Okay. In terms of minutes, I'm saying. Okay. Of course, in terms of hours, they are 3, 6, 9, and like that. Okay. So at a time when the minute hand of a clock, let's say I'm showing it as this arrow, this red colored arrow, is 15 minutes past the hour, it is over here. And by the time it becomes 30 minutes past the hour, it is over here. Or by the time it is 45 minutes past the hour, it is over here. Or by the time it is, let's say, 50 minutes past the hour, it is somewhere over here like this. So for example, for the first part, we just find the displacement from 15 to 30. So it's this. So the actual displacement, so this red colored arrow that I've drawn, this is the minute hand of the clock. And the arrow head is nothing but the tip of the minute hand. So since I'm talking about the displacement of the tip of the minute hand, I have to just find out from 15 to 30, for example, is the displacement from here to here. So the answer to your first part will just become this, which you can now very easily calculate just by using geometry, because it's a isosceles right angle triangle. So this is nothing but the displacement of the minute hand from some x hours and 15 minutes to x hours and 30 minutes. Similarly, in the next half an hour, you can see the displacement will be from here to here, because it will go from 30 to 60 minutes like that. So that's how you can find out the answer to this. So with this hint, I think you will be able to figure out this question. Okay, so it's not something very difficult. So I'm leaving it in the notes for you guys. You can go through it again later. Now I come to the ninth question, and the ninth question is something which is a little bit tougher. Okay. In fact, it will help us understand the vector difference concept again. So in the ninth question, again, first of all, let us understand the language of the question. So it says that you have two vectors P and Q, given two vectors P and Q, and no particular condition between them. So they don't have to be same magnitude or anything like that, such that the vector R is the resultant of P and Q. Okay. Whereas if we take the vector Q and reverse it, then we get the vector minus Q. And if we take the resultant of that minus Q with the vector P, then we get another vector which is S. So these are the two statements given in the question, statement 1 and statement 2, that the vector R is the sum of P and Q, whereas the vector S is the sum of P with the vector minus Q. So where, what is the vector minus Q? Minus Q is the, you can say, reverse of vector Q. That is, it has the same magnitude as the vector Q, but its direction is opposite. Okay, so this is first of all what the language of the question is saying, and then you have to prove something about R and S. Okay, so first of all, make sure the statements are clear in terms of the language of the question. Then we'll understand what we mean by this vector minus Q a little bit more. Okay. So now let us convert this to a vector diagram. Okay. So suppose my vector P looks like this. Okay, so this arrow represents vector P, and my vector Q is an arrow which looks like this. Then in comparison, how will the vector minus Q look like? So that is the important thing. So the vector minus Q will be a vector which you get by reversing Q. So that means that will be a vector which is like this. It will have the same magnitude as Q. So it will be the same length, but it will be anti-parallel. This is what we mean by the vector minus Q. Okay. So minus Q is such that its direction is opposite. To Q, and magnitude is same. Okay, or in other words, we can say magnitude of minus q vector is the same as the magnitude of q vector, which we can give with a symbol q. Okay. So just first of all, go through this information before we continue further with the question. Okay. So this is the interpretation of q and minus q, like this. Alright, so hope this concept is clear. This is the relationship between q and minus q. Okay. Now let's come back to what the question is saying. That it's saying that if I add the vector p with the vector q, that gives me the vector r. Whereas if I add the vector p but with the vector minus q, then it gives me this vector s. So let's convert that to geometrical information. Let's convert that to some geometrical information now. So it says that if I take the vector p, which is let's say like this, and to that I add the vector q, which is let's say like this, I will get the resultant vector as let's say r, which is like this. So this is a triangle we are already very familiar with. It's nothing but the vector addition triangle, which we've been seeing all along today. So this is nothing, no big deal for us. We have to just apply the statement of the parallelogram law, sorry, the triangle law. So here, if this angle is theta, we know how to find the resultant's magnitude, r's magnitude in terms of p, q and theta. So if this angle is theta, we already know that r is equal to that formula. It is root of p square plus q square plus 2pq cos theta. So see, when we are proving what is given in the question, we can replace r in terms of this, in terms of root of p square plus q square plus 2pq cos theta. Okay, so this is no big deal at all. The problem is when we come to the second thing, what is s? So let's understand what is s over here. So for s, we first draw the vector p. So that is the same thing that we had earlier. Okay, but now instead of adding q, which would have been in this direction, we have to add which vector? We have to add the vector minus q. So minus q would be a vector which is now lying over here. This is the thing we have to understand. See, what's happening here is the vector q was along this direction, which is making an angle theta with the vector p. So this angle was theta. Hence, the vector minus q, which will be in which direction now? It will be opposite to that. So if this angle was theta, now in this figure, this angle will become theta. Okay. So this was our vector p. This was the direction of q, this one. So the direction of minus q is what? Opposite to that. So it's 180 degrees to that. So this is where my vector minus q is lying. Okay. And that is why that vector is at such a place that this angle is theta. Because this angle and this angle you can see are opposite angles. So now what is the vector s? It is the sum of p and minus q. So I have to sum up this vector p with this vector minus q, and that will give me my resultant vector s. So p plus minus q is nothing but from this initial point to this final point. So it is this vector s. So now what I have to do is from this diagram, I have to find the magnitude of s in terms of which things? The magnitude of p, q and theta, the angle between them. Once I do that, I can compare this with the formula which I have written for r already. And by comparing that, I'll be able to prove what they've asked in the question, that r square plus s square should be double of p square plus q square. Okay. So hope the diagram is clear up to here. Okay, now I'm just magnifying the diagram, and from that I'll explain how we will solve for this. Okay. So it's very similar to how we had solved for r earlier today. So what we'll do here is we will drop a perpendicular from this point onto this side. Okay. So if we drop a perpendicular here and we label this side as x, okay, and we label this side as y, then this side here becomes how much? It becomes p minus x. Because this whole vector, remember, this whole vector was p. Okay. So again, looking at this triangle, which I'm shading over here, what is happening? X upon q, because this side is q, okay, is equal to base upon hypotenuse, so it is cos theta, and y upon q is nothing but perpendicular upon hypotenuse, so it is nothing but sine theta. So first step, we will get x and y in terms of sine theta and cos theta. And then next what we'll do is we'll solve this triangle in which we'll find this side s. So it's a very similar operation to what we've done for triangle law vector addition. Only the diagram becomes a little different now because the interior angle is theta, not the exterior angle. Okay. So what I would suggest is now you go through this section, this diagram in detail, and now work out the value of what we're looking for. Work out the value of s in terms of p, q, and theta. Just try this out. And the moment you work out the answer, you will see you will get the relationship that the question is looking for. Okay, so hope you understood what I'm asking for. I'm asking you to solve these two triangles. One triangle I've already solved for you, the shaded one on the right. So x upon q is base upon hypotenuse and y upon q is perpendicular upon hypotenuse. So we've expressed it in terms of sine theta and cos theta. Now next I want you to put those values of x and y in the second triangle, the one which I've tick marked, which is on the left, and from that find the value of s. Okay, so just try this out, people, and tell me if you're getting some kind of an answer which is useful. Anybody getting an answer so far? Okay, I have one message here. Let me check. Okay, not yet. But anyhow, hope all of you are following the process away. Okay, so first of all, reversing these relations now, x is equal to how much? X is equal to q cos theta, and y is equal to how much? It is q sin theta. That is coming from solving the triangle which is on the right hand side in this triangle. Now the triangle on the left hand side, what is the base? The base is p minus x, and the perpendicular is y. And what we have to find? We have to find the hypotenuse, which is s. Okay. So in that triangle, what is happening now? Is that s is becoming square root of p minus x whole square plus y square. So in this expression now, all you have to do is substitute this value of x and y. And from that you will get a value of s, which will give you your final answer. Okay, so just do the substitution and tell me what you get. So substitute this here and follow these steps. So it's very similar to the triangle law derivation we had done earlier. Only difference is there the sign in between here was plus and here the sign in between is minus. So do these steps and you should come to the answer that S, yes, very good Ishita, that's correct. You will get it as p square plus q square minus 2pq cos theta. The same trick. You take sine square plus cos square as 1 and you will get this. Okay. So this is the final value of S you will get. Now open the whole square, then take sine square plus cos square equal to 1 after taking q square common, and you will come to this step. So just a couple of steps from this point onwards. Okay, and having done those couple of steps, what you'll see is that S is this, and of course, R was how much? R was root of P square plus Q square plus 2PQ cos theta. Okay, so take equation 2 and the earlier one was equation 1, square them and add them. Okay, so next operation we'll do is equation 1 squared plus equation 2 squared. Equation 1 and 2 squared and added. So left hand side will give you S square plus R square, and right hand side when you square and add, you see the cos theta term will cancel out. So you'll get 2 times of P square plus Q square, hence blue. Okay, so this becomes our complete solution of this. So it's a tricky question in that sense, because first of all, getting the value of S, you have to do the derivation from that triangle, and then the algebraic manipulation and all involved. Okay, but nonetheless, through this question, you are learning a lot about vector algebra. That is the part of, I mean, that is the reason why we are doing all these questions. Okay, so that was the 9th question for you. Now the 10th question was actually very similar to the question we did about the equilateral triangle. Now you'll remember just a while back we did the triangle of A plus B plus C where the magnitudes were coming out to be the same. So if you apply the same concept in the 10th question, you will be able to solve yourself. Okay? So now I'm going to move ahead of the worksheet and I'm going to come to the next thing, which is very important, which is that when we are applying triangle law, so we are still on the part where we are discussing about addition of two vectors, but we have to see how to apply triangle law when theta is an obtuse angle. Okay, so next thing is in applications of triangle law. How to solve for cos theta when theta is obtuse. Okay, that is theta is between 90 degrees and 180 degrees. If theta is an angle like this. So in other words, when our vector diagram looks something like this, that when we are trying to solve this kind of situation, the vector E and the vector B, they are such that this angle theta is obtuse, and we are trying to find the resultant using that formula. Okay, so theta is an obtuse angle now. So when I use that formula, that magnitude of the resultant is root of A square plus B square plus 2AB cos theta. In this, what do I do about cos theta? For theta, for example, 120 degrees or 150 degrees or something like this. When theta is an obtuse angle, then what do we do with it? Okay, so just write down the heading of the topic first and then I'll explain how we proceed here. All right, so you understood what we are trying to do here. Okay. So next, how do we do it? Okay. So for that, we come to trigonometry in second quadrant actually. So it's basically about, is the part of the more general subject, how to find trigonometry in 4 quadrants. Okay. That is when theta is anything between 0 and 90. between 0 and 360. How do we find out sine theta, cos theta, tan theta? So you'll understand that this subject actually goes beyond what we have learned in trigonometry till date. Okay. Till date, what we have learned in trigonometry is about right angle triangles. So our understanding of trigonometry is based on, for right angle triangles, we've understood that sine theta, cos theta, and tan theta come on the basis of these things. That if we have a 90-degree triangle like this, where one of the angles is 90, and we label this angle as theta, then we label the opposite side as the perpendicular, the same side as the base, and the third side as the as the hypotenuse, and we just express, or we define sine theta, cos theta, and tan theta as ratios. Now, that is our definition of sine, cos, and tan. That this is the ratio of perpendicular upon hypotenuse. This is the ratio of base upon hypotenuse. This is the ratio of perpendicular upon base. But you can see over here that because it's a right angle triangle, theta has to be less than 90 degrees. Now, because one of the angles is already 90. So the sum of this angle and the opposite angle, this one, is actually equal to 90 degrees. So that means each angle has to be less than 90. So then where is the question of theta being 120 degrees or 150 degrees and all that? So here we see that when we are talking about trigonometry in context of right angle triangles, we are only talking about theta in context of it being an acute angle. We're not talking about how to find sine, cos, and tan for theta being an obtuse angle or an angle which is in third or fourth quadrant like that. So that is why we have to move ahead from our normal trigonometry which we have done till date, which is trigonometry of right angle triangles, to this new thing that we are trying to learn, that trigonometry in 4 quadrants. This is what we are trying to learn now. The background is that we know how to apply trigonometry in right angle triangles. So this is where we'll see that for 4 quadrants, okay, so for general theta, for a general value of theta, so there is no restriction that it has to be acute. So theta can be anything from 0 to 360 degrees. Okay. Sine theta, cos theta, and tan theta are no longer defined as ratios, but they are defined in terms of something called projections. Okay. So this understanding of projections is very important from vectors point of view also, and later from your maths point of view also. In maths, you might have learned something called ASTC rule, or some of you might have heard about this. So ASTC rule is like a way of memorizing the formula that you get for trigonometry in 4 quadrants. However, it doesn't really give you an explanation of why the formula are like that. Here we will develop a complete explanation and a logical method of understanding why the ASTC formula are that way. Okay? So just be a little bit patient for the next few minutes, and you will understand how the principles of ASTC actually come forth, or how to calculate sine, cos, and tan in terms of the general angle. Okay. So first of all, we now define angle in a different way. We don't define the angle in terms of a right angle triangle. We define angle in such a way that it is nothing but the angle with respect to my xy coordinate frame. Okay. So this is my xy coordinate system. Then the angle theta is defined as the angle by which we are rotating a certain object like a rod. So if I keep a rod like this, such that from the x-axis it has been rotated through an angle, anti-clockwise angle as theta, that is what I define as the angle theta. It is the anti-clockwise rotation with respect to the x-axis. Okay, so the definition of angle now changes. It is the anti-clockwise rotation with respect to x-axis. So for example, if I say theta is equal to plus 30 degrees, it will be somewhere over here. If I say theta is equal to plus 45 degrees, it will be somewhere here. If I say theta is equal to 120 degrees, it will be somewhere here. If I say theta is minus 30, it will be somewhere here. Because anti-clockwise is positive, means clockwise becomes negative. Okay. So that is the first thing. The definition of angle now changes. It becomes with respect to how we have rotated a rod like this, okay, with respect to the x-axis. So for example, if I say theta 1 is equal to 45 degrees and I say theta 2 is equal to 120 degrees, okay, then in context of my new interpretation, this is how it will look. It will mean that something which I have rotated by the angle theta 1, which is 45 degrees, will now lie over here. Lie over here. So this is my theta 1, which is 45 degrees. Something which I have rotated through an angle of theta 2, which is in fact I've taken as 120 degrees. That something will now lie in the second quadrant. It will be like this. It will be somewhere over here, let's say, where this total angle from here to here, this angle is 120 degrees. Okay. Now let's say I've got something else now, which is rotated by a different angle. Like I've got theta 3 equal to minus 30 degrees. So that third object which is rotated by theta 3, it will lie over here now, because it's a negative angle. So it should be clockwise instead of anti-clockwise. So theta 3 equal to minus 30 degrees, we'll place it over here like this. Theta 1 equal to plus 45 was placing that over here. Theta 1 was positive angle of 45 degrees. Theta 2 was a positive angle of 120 degrees. So it was looking like this. Okay. So first of all, our interpretation of angle becomes different, as you can see over here. This is one important point we should understand. Okay. Then we will come to what are sine theta, cos theta, and tan theta. So we'll see that for this particular rod, which is at 120, there is some different meaning of sine theta and cos theta. For this rod, which is at theta 1 equal to 45, there's some different meaning of cos theta and sine theta. So that will be in terms of projections. So next thing we'll understand here is what a projection itself is. Okay. So, but first I'll just leave you to understand this diagram a little bit. Okay, so this is what we mean by an angle of 45 or an angle of 120 or an angle of minus 30 degrees. Okay. Now next we will understand what is the projection. So as I'm sure many of you are aware, the term projection in physics is almost like the term shadow. So if you just imagine a rod lying over there, it is casting some kind of a shadow on the x-axis and some kind of a shadow on the y-axis. So that is what we mean by projections. So the trigonometric meaning of the term projections, let's understand. Projections on the x-axis, which we just denote with a small symbol x, and on the y-axis, sorry, not off. So projections on the x-axis, on the y-axis. Let's understand what these mean. So this means something very simple, that if I have a rod which is lying at an angle theta like this, and it is of length L. Now typically for projections, we always take the length as a single unit. We take it as a standard rod. So the rod that we are considering over here is literally an object, a linear object. It is of unit length. Okay. Now if we drop a perpendicular from the rod onto the x-axis, okay, then the length that we get along the x-axis, that is called the x projection. So that's nothing but the shadow that the rod is throwing. So this quantity here is the x projection of the rod. Similarly, if you drop a perpendicular from the rod onto the y-axis, then the shadow is throwing on the y-axis. That is called the y projection, and in short form we denote it by y. So this is what we mean by projections of the rod. Okay. And remember here, now we are referring to a standard rod, meaning that we are taking its length to be unity. 1 unit, whatever our unit is in our system, whether it is 1 meter, 1 foot or whatever, but it's of unit length. So our projections are x and y. So next thing, this is the meaning of the term projections. Now next we will see how we define the projections in terms of sine theta and cos theta. Okay. So coming back here to this right angle triangle, you can see in this triangle, x by L is equal to cos theta. So that means x is how much? It is L cos theta. And remember, it's a standard rod, so L is unity. So x only is cos theta. So in other words, what is our definition of cos theta now? It is the projection of this rod of unit length along the x-axis. That becomes our new definition of cos theta. That's why I told you now we will define cos theta, sin theta, and tan theta in terms of projections. So this is the meaning of cos theta, okay, in terms of projections. So this is the projection-based definition of cos theta. Similarly, in that triangle, when you observe further, you will see that y is the perpendicular. So y by L is nothing but sine theta. So y becomes L sine theta. And since it's a standard rod, so L is unity. So in other words, the projection on the y-axis is nothing but sine theta. So this is like a universal definition of sine theta and cos theta now. It is not restricted to a right angle triangle. It just means that if you take a standard rod of unit length and keep it at an angle theta with respect to the x-axis, then the shadow it will cast on the x-axis, that is nothing but cos theta. And the shadow it will cast on the y-axis, that is nothing but sine theta. So cos theta becomes nothing but the x projection, and sine theta becomes nothing but the y projection. This becomes the new definition of sine theta and cos theta. And for the moment, we will concentrate on sine and cos. I'll come to tan in a moment. Okay, so just make sure you understand this definition clearly. So just take a minute to absorb this information. We'll be back with more. So this is how we define sine and cos in terms of projections. Okay, people, hope this is clear. Now, next thing is tan theta, and tan theta, just always think of it as the ratio of y by x. So tan theta becomes the ratio of y by x, or it becomes the ratio of sine theta upon cos theta. So this is how we define tan theta. Okay. So these become the new definitions of sine theta, cos theta, and tan theta in terms of projections. Now let us see how this definition works for theta in the second quadrant. Okay, so we'll immediately understand the ASTC rule, why the second quadrant is called S, that is only sine is positive and tan and cos are negative. So let us look at theta in the second quadrant, which means that we are looking at a case where theta is greater than 90 and less than 180. So diagram wise, see how it will look. It will look something like this. That if this is my y-axis and this is my x-axis, and this is the origin point. Now I have rotated something by an obtuse angle, so it will lie somewhere here. It will lie in the second quadrant. Likewise, if I rotate it by more than 180, it will lie in the third quadrant. By more than 270, it will lie in the fourth quadrant, like that. Okay. So you can see this is an example of theta satisfying this condition, that is greater than 90 but less than 180. So now for this rod, which is again by the way of unit length, what is happening is, if you see the projection that it is casting on the axis, immediately you realize that the projection on the x is towards the negative side. So this x projection should be a negative quantity. Whereas the projection it is casting, or the shadow is casting on the y-axis, is on the positive side of the origin. So the y projection is positive. Now you recall that x was nothing but cos theta and y was nothing but sin theta. So immediately you understand that cos theta is negative, whereas sin theta is positive. And tan theta is just the ratio of sine by cos. So that means tan will also be what kind of quantity? It will be negative. Because sine is positive and cos is negative. So that means the ratio of sine and cos, which is tan, will become negative. So that is why in the second quadrant, what happens is sine is positive, whereas cosine and tan, they are both negative. This is what you might have learned in maths as the AST symbol. Now you're understanding the logic of it, why that happens. I'm just leaving you with this diagram for a moment, so you'll understand why this is happening. Now, of course, we learn not only that they are which one is positive and which one is negative, but we'll actually learn how to calculate the value of sine theta and cos theta when theta is obtuse. So in just another 2 to 4 minutes, you will learn how to calculate the value of cos 120 or how to calculate the value of cos 150 or something like that. But first, make sure you understood this thing, the algebraic sign of x and y. Now, the projection on the x-axis is to the negative side of the origin. So x should be a negative quantity. The projection on the y-axis is on the positive side of the origin. So it should be, so the moment you have rotated this rod through an obtuse angle, it is now lying wedged between the negative x-axis and the positive y-axis. That's why the y projection is positive and the x projection is negative. And in the previous slide, you remember x was nothing but cos theta. Cos theta was defined as the x projection for a rod of unit length. Sin theta was defined as the y projection, and tan theta was defined as the ratio of y by x. So you can see that if x is negative and y is positive, that means cos is negative, tan is negative, but sin is becoming positive. Okay. And by the same logic at a later stage, we will learn what happens in third and fourth quadrant also. But today, right now, we are more interested only in the second quadrant. So we learn in the second quadrant, the value of cos theta is negative, whereas the value of sin theta is positive. Okay. So next up, let us understand how to calculate the value. So now, how to actually calculate cos theta and sin theta for theta being obtuse. How do we do this? Okay. So for example, we want to calculate cos 120 degrees or sin 120 degrees. How we do this? So for this, let's again go back to a diagram and understand how we do it. Okay. So let us say that our rod is this one, and this total angle here, theta, in our example we have taken it as 120 degrees, but it's any obtuse angle. Okay. So when we drop the perpendicular here in this diagram, this is becoming x, okay, and this is becoming y. Okay. So now what we'll do is we'll concentrate on this triangle for a moment. This is a right angle triangle, so we can apply our normal trigonometry here. And for this triangle, we can say that if this angle is alpha, here alpha will become how much? It will become 60 degrees, because this was, so alpha is actually 180 degrees minus theta. So in this case, when theta is 120, alpha is becoming 60 degrees. Okay. So for a moment, we will now concentrate on this triangle. Yeah. So we will for a moment now concentrate on this triangle. So alpha was 60 degrees. So look at this triangle now separately. In this triangle, what is happening? This angle is alpha. This side is L, which is 1 unit. This side is having how much length? Mod y. Now why I'll say mod is because y is a projection I've defined, so it has algebraic sign. But in a triangle, when I define the sides, they're just lengths. So they have only magnitude. So their magnitudes are x and y. So if you concentrate on that small triangle I've drawn at the top, this triangle, draw that again over here. So for this triangle, this side is x, but magnitude. This side is magnitude of y. And this hypotenuse is the length, which was unit. And this angle was my alpha. So how much is mod y? Mod y by L is nothing but sine theta or sine alpha in this case. And how much is x? Mod x upon L is cos alpha. Okay. And in both of these, remember L was unity. So what happens? Mod y is sine alpha. And similarly, mod x is cos alpha. Okay. So this is a very critical step. So I'm leaving it for you to just quickly analyze and understand this step fully in context of the above diagram also. Okay. So from the above diagram, I'm just picking out this small triangle. Okay. So I've rotated my rod through an angle of, let's say, 120. So it's casting a shadow of x on the negative x-axis or a projection of x on the negative x-axis. So you can see x is negative, and it's throwing a projection on the positive y-axis. So you can see y is positive. Remember in this diagram, it was like this. Okay. Now all you have to do is solve this triangle. So this smaller triangle, I've redrawn it below, and we have to just solve that triangle. In this diagram, this was our x-axis. So this is x prime. That's why this side is negative. Now let's come to the smaller triangle below. And that's this one. Okay. So in this triangle, you can see these sides are mod y and mod x, and they are given by this and this. Now what we do next is put the algebraic sign. So remember, y was positive. So that means how much is y? It is positive of sine alpha. But remember, x was falling in which side? The negative side. So x is becoming how much? X is becoming minus of sine alpha. And further, remember what is x? X is nothing but cos theta. So cos theta is becoming minus of cos alpha. Just small correction here. This will be cos because x was. So magnitude of x, mod of x was cos alpha, but remember x's sign was negative. So what is the value of x? Is minus cos alpha. So further, x is defined in terms of projection as what? Cos theta. So cos theta becomes minus cos alpha. Whereas y is defined as sine theta, and from above that is equal to how much? Plus of sine alpha. So this becomes the relationship. Okay. So next, if we substitute theta as 120 degrees, you can see alpha is becoming how much? 60 degrees. So we are getting from here the relation that cos of 120 is in fact equal to what? Minus cos 60. Okay. And similarly, from the second relation, we will get sine of 120 will become how much? It will become positive of sine 60. Okay. So further, this will become minus half, whereas this is positive of root 3 by 2. Okay. So this is how we calculate the values of sine and cos in the second quadrant. This process, okay. Theta is 120. So first from theta we calculate alpha, where alpha is 180 minus theta. And then we use these two formulae over here. These become the generic formulae. That cos theta is minus cos alpha and sine theta is plus sine alpha. So just make a quick review of this, and then we'll do a couple of practice questions before we wind up today's lecture. And with this, you will see we'll be able to solve any question where theta is anything between 0 and 180. So we can now apply parallel triangle law of vector addition to all sorts of vector relationships. The angle between the vectors could be acute, it can be obtuse also, but in both cases we'll be able to successfully apply the formula because we know how to calculate cos theta and sin theta for obtuse angles. So just make a note of this and understand this up to these values -12 and plus root 3/2. Then we will see some more examples. Okay, students, so hope it is clear up to this step. Okay, I'll just refresh my whiteboard for a moment because it's again giving some lag. So coming back to this. Okay, so now you can see we have got the formula that the general formula for the second quadrant is becoming like this. Based on this, the general formula fortunately still getting some lag. Okay. For second quadrant, that is theta being greater than 90, less than 180, becomes like this, that cos theta is minus of cos alpha, and alpha, remember, was what? It was 180 minus theta. So we'll directly write it as 180 minus theta. All right. So this becomes our general formula of calculating cos theta. Similarly, a general formula of calculating sin theta becomes positive of sin alpha, and alpha was, remember how much it was, 180 minus theta. So these are the two formulae we'll always use for calculating sin and cos. And then tan, of course, will come from ratio of these. So don't worry about tan just now. We'll see in the next step how to calculate tan. So first of all, write down these two formulae because this is what we'll be using every day from now on when we are applying in vector algebra. Because many a time in vector algebra, we will be required to find out sin theta and cos theta for obtuse angles. So that time we have to remember to substitute these formulae. Now with today's lecture, hopefully you've understood the logic behind these formulae also. Why your cos theta comes with the minus sign, whereas your sin theta comes with the positive sign. Because always remember, if your angle is obtuse, then the object which is rotated by that angle is lying between the negative x-axis and the positive y-axis. So its x projection, which is cos theta, is negative, whereas its y projection, which is sin theta, is positive. Okay. So that is what this was actually about. Okay. And tan theta, finally, the third part of this formula, is just, you can define it as sin theta by cos theta. So by that logic, it actually becomes minus of tan 180 minus theta, becomes like this. No, because this is positive and this is negative, so the ratio becomes negative. So these are the three formulae that we use for calculating the trigonometric functions sin, cos, and tan of any obtuse angle. So as I was telling you, this is extremely important for us in vector application. So because it's important, let's just wind this up by a few examples. Okay. So I want you to use this formula now to calculate these things from. Find out the values of sine of 135 degrees. Then again, cos of 150 degrees. Okay. And then again, tan of 120 degrees. Just calculate these three and you'll see you'll get the full confidence on how to apply these formulae for the second quadrant. So I'll just minimize this so you know which formulae we have to apply. They're just written on top over here. These formulas. These are the ones that we have to use to solve this three questions given in the board. Okay. So just use these and tell me the values. I'm waiting for your answers on chat. Yeah, anybody got the answers? Ishita, Dhrumi, anybody? Aryan? Yes, Dhrumi, that's correct for the third part. Very good. Oh, good, Ishita. Okay. So let me quickly take you through the solutions and we can wind up then. So we'll just use these formula. So in the case of cos of 135, for example, I'll just use the formula that cos theta is minus of cos 180 minus theta. So in the second quadrant, remember cos is negative. So that makes it minus of cos 45. Okay. So minus of cos 45 degrees. And cos 45 you know is 1 by root 2. So minus of that becomes minus 1 by 2. Okay. I'm getting, so let's see if this works better. So this is minus of cos 45. So this is 1 by 2. Okay. So that becomes the answer to the first part. This one. Similarly, I'd asked you to find sine of 150 degrees. So remember, sine is plus sine 180 minus theta, because sine is positive in the second quadrant. So that becomes how much? It becomes plus of sine 30 degrees. So that's why your answer here will be plus half. So that is the answer to the second part. This is the answer to the second part. And likewise, now the answer to the third part. Tan of 120 degrees, just applying that formula, it is minus of tan 180 minus 120. So it is minus of tan 60 . Okay, so it's minus root 3. So this becomes the answer to the third part. All right, so I'm just minimizing this a little bit. to be able to see clearly. Okay. So anyway, this is where our lecture concludes today. So we have now completed, actually in a sense, we have completed what is the first lecture of vectors, because typically when we are taking classroom lectures, they're of the duration 2.5 to 3 hours, more like 3 hours. So the first hour that we did last time was more like an introduction to physics. We discussed a lot of general things and all that. So by the time we started vectors till today, we have just done about 2.5 to 3 hours. And this is the first official lecture of vectors in that sense, that it is up to the triangle law of vector addition, where not only we understand triangle law's own statement, that root of a square plus b square wala formula, but we also understand how to substitute cos theta when theta happens to be an obtuse angle. So this is a very important part of the application of this. And at the end of the lecture, I will also be sharing with you some more worksheet and some questions and parts to study from your module also. So hope all of you have received the PDF version of your physics module, which is useful mathematics in physics. That's what it's called. And the first section of that module is vectors. So you start going through that module. I will be giving you exact page numbers and section numbers of what you have to read, as well as the questions, certain questions which you have to attempt from the exercise, along with the worksheet and all. And that along with the revision of today's lecture notes or video or whatever will give you enough to make sure that you understand from lecture 3 onwards, which will be the next time. So next time, just like we've done vector addition, here we'll learn about vector subtraction, and then we'll also learn the second representation of vectors, where instead of using the geometrical representation where we are making arrows, we make use of coordinate geometry. And that kind of representation of vectors is called the component algebra. So if you want to read a little bit ahead, you can do that also. So next lecture's topics will mostly be about subtraction of vectors and then component algebra of vectors, or what is called resolution of a vector into components. But from today's lecture, the very important thing is the trigonometry in 2 quadrants, the first and second quadrant, and the meaning of sine theta, cos theta, and tan theta in terms of projections. So make sure you revise that part, and of course, make sure you complete all the questions of the first worksheet based on the hints which I've given, and understand those examples also very carefully. Okay? So that's it for today's lecture. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Best of luck, and stay healthy, stay safe. That is very important at this point of time. And if you have any doubts, you can contact me directly. You know my direct WhatsApp number is the same which is on the group. Okay. So that's it from me today, guys. All the best.